So you've been through the avoidant experience. You probably ended up with a shattered heart, and you don't want to go through it again. Or maybe you've just heard all about avoidant attachers, and you don't want to go through it either, and you want to avoid the avoidance. So, what are some of the key red flags to look out for to indicate that the person that you're dating might be a dismissive avoidant or a fearful avoidant that leans heavily dismissive? Let's get into them. Start out with a big one, and this is a big one that can be revealed by asking them a very simple question. Ask the person you're dating, what does your past relationship history look like? Why did your past relationships fail? And what did you learn from them? If you're dating a person that is self-reflective, a person that's emotionally available, they're going to be able to give you a very specific answer. Even if they were in a relationship with a toxic person like a narcissist, there still should be something they learned. For example, I learned why I need to hold boundaries. I learned about effective communication, stuff like that. But if you are dating somebody who is severely dismissive avoidant, for example, they are very unlikely to be able to give you a clear, coherent answer. They are far more likely to give you very vague answers like, oh, well, we just drifted apart, or we just fell out of love. It just wasn't the right person. Work was just too busy for me to be in a relationship. Things along those lines. They also might give you the all my exes are crazy answer. This person was terrible, they were crazy. But what they're very unlikely to give you is anything that they learned from those past failures in their relationships. And the reason is because avoidance avoids self-reflection. Self-reflection and introspection is extremely difficult for them. And it's all because of a core wound of shame. This is a person that grew up with consistent childhood emotional neglect, growing up in households where you don't talk about feelings, where they weren't shown that love in the way that they needed as a kid. They personalized it, growing up to feel defective, unlovable, worthless, etc. So, in their mind, if they were to self-reflect and take accountability for any of their role in failed relationships, it would be confirming their own inner defectiveness as they perceive it. A healthy person looks and goes, okay, I made this mistake. This is how I can do better. But in the mind of the avoidant, it's, I did this wrong because I'm defective, because I'm worthless, because I'm broken. It's too painful. They don't want to go there. They don't want to poke at that core wound of shame. So what they do is they look to blame their behaviors, blame their failures, blame their fears on external things, such as their ex. But they're very unlikely to take any learned lessons from those failures because in order to actually learn the lessons in a real, true, meaningful way, it would require self-reflection. So learning those lessons is something that they're probably not likely to reveal, probably vague answers, or simply blaming their exes for all the past failed relationships. The next one is one that can appear to be a green flag, but it's actually a red flag. Hyper-independence. Fiercely independent, doesn't need help from anybody. Strong, independent person. It can seem like a green flag, it can seem attractive. But here's the thing. A healthy, functioning, autonomous adult should be an independent person, but it should be a given. The securely attached person, the emotionally available person, doesn't feel the need to assert their independence because of course they're an independent person. Why should they have to boast about that? But the avoidant is actually telegraphing their fears because one of their biggest fears is losing their independence in a relationship to somebody who's ultimately going to abandon and reject them. And it goes back to their childhood again. They had to learn that they can only rely on themselves for their own needs because their emotional needs were not met as a child. But in addition to that, they often grew up with a parent or parents that were very controlling, not nurturing, and very smothering. So what they learn to do is to associate emotional closeness with losing your autonomy, losing your independence. And they fear being controlled in a relationship. So when they're talking about how independent they are, what they're really letting you know is what their fear is. And many of them can go so far as to putting their independence even on their dating profile. Strong, independent, free-spirited, things along those lines. Those are major avoidant red flags. The third one, conversations are always surface level. They don't really like to get into the deeper emotional conversations. And when you try to have those emotional conversations, they quickly shift gears and try to redirect the conversation. They get noticeably uncomfortable when you try to have deeper conversations. They like to keep it light, happy, surface level. That's because this is a person that does not feel comfortable being vulnerable in any capacity. Being vulnerable was unsafe for them as a child, and it gives them enormous anxiety as an adult because of that wound of shame. See, if they get too vulnerable, if they lower their walls and let their guard down and let somebody in, their subconscious fear is this person is going to figure out that I'm not good enough, that I'm defective, they're going to reject me. So they like to keep things light. They like to keep it surface level. They like light banter, flirty banter, but they don't want to have those deep, emotional, revealing conversations. And at times when they do actually allow themselves to get vulnerable, it's usually followed by a quick pullback where you don't hear from them much for a couple days because they're trying to create emotional distance to feel safe again. Emotional closeness causes discomfort for them. It causes them to feel anxiety. They feel unsafe. But emotional distance feels safe because that way they can keep their walls up and keep their partner on the other side of the wall, and then the avoidant feels safe. All right, red flag number 4. This is a person that talks about the walls that they have up. Sometimes they will openly tell you that they've been hurt in the past. They have these wounds and they have these walls up because they've been hurt before. And it takes them some time to bring their walls down. Well, here's the thing. Everybody should have a healthy guard, a healthy skepticism going into a new relationship. That should be a given because you don't know this person. But for the avoidant, when they're revealing their wall, it's not just a wall. It is Fort Knox. This is a profound wall. And reality is they're not really able to take down that wall the way that they often think they are able to. So if they're asserting their wall, it is a much bigger wall than even they think it is. These are walls that really go back to childhood when vulnerability and emotional expression was simply unsafe for them. All right, number 5, any kind of hot and cold behavior. Hot, cold, hot, cold. One day they're all into you and they're communicating all day, and then the next day they are distant. That can be regarding text message communications, phone calls, or even time you're spending together. Sometimes they're all in and they're making tons of plans, and then sometimes they're canceling plans and you're not hearing from them for days. This is likely because they are trying to create emotional distance. This is a person that feels unsafe when things are getting too close. So after that period of hot, when they are coming towards you and everything's getting great and you're getting closer together, it causes them anxiety. So they feel the urge to create distance so they can feel safe again. That's because emotional closeness was not safe for them as a child. Deep down, they do want love and connection, but then when they get it, it's very scary, so they look to keep it at a distance, resulting in hot and cold behavior. One more as a bonus, love bombing. Not all avoidants love bomb, but many, many, many do. And when they do love bomb, it's usually a bit different than when a narcissist does it. Now, they're usually not doing the grand, over-the-top gestures, but they are coming across very into it, very emotionally available early on, often advancing the relationship, telling you things like nobody ever made them feel the way that you make them feel, and they really see a future with you, and things like that. And they can often rush the early stages of the relationship very quickly. That's because this is a person that does need external validation. They have a low self-esteem and a lack of self-worth. They don't know how to internally validate themselves. So they need that validation from their partner. And they are people pleasers at their core. Going back to their childhood, the way they learn to get any kind of love, approval, and affection is through making other people happy to get that validation. So when they are love bombing, they are showing you the things and telling you the things that you want to hear, so you give them that approval and that validation. Plus, they are riding the dopamine wave. They have a lifetime of bottled up suppressed emotions. And that dopamine from that validation and that connection that you have with them is making them feel good. Dopamine is the reward hormone. It is making them feel great. So their fears aren't triggered yet, and they're letting all these bottled up emotions flow out onto you because they don't have any awareness of their own fears and triggers. So They feel safe, they think they got it right, and they're letting it flow out onto you. But when the dopamine wears off, their fears take over and they're not able to sustain what they promised you early on in the relationship. So if it feels like too much, too soon, too fast, it probably is.